Sarah had long felt as though she was invisible, blending quietly into the bustle of the hospital corridors. As a new nurse in her late 20s, she was grateful for the chance to help others, but constantly battled her own shyness. She loved caring for patients, offering a gentle smile and soft words whenever they were in pain or lonely. Yet she rarely spoke more than necessary, fearing she might say the wrong thing or break the professional boundary that seemed to keep her anxiety in check. For the most part, she was content to be in the background. If a timid smile and a warm hand on a patient's shoulder was enough, then that was all she felt able to offer. But deep inside, she yearned to do more. She watched her colleagues confidently talking, joking, and sharing parts of their lives with patients. She admired their ability to bring a spark of warmth to those sterile hospital rooms simply through companionship. Sometimes she imagined herself stepping into that role of emotional caretaker with more conviction, cracking jokes, making patients laugh, ensuring that each one felt seen and heard. But every time the vision started to form in her mind, it would dissolve in a haze of self-doubt. Why would patients want to laugh with a shy, soft-spoken nurse? On a particularly cold winter morning, when even the hospital's bland coffee couldn't thaw her numb fingers, Sarah was assigned to the oncology ward. The hallways there were somber and quiet, bright posters about hope and perseverance offering jarring contrast to the subdued, serious atmosphere. She braced herself to see the weary faces that reminded her of the heavy burdens the patients carried. As she walked by one of the rooms, she noticed a teenage boy, bald from chemotherapy, glued to a comedic video on his phone. He was chuckling, albeit weakly, his thin shoulders shaking ever so slightly. Something about his laughter reverberated inside her, sparking a strange warmth in her chest. She found herself smiling. In that single moment, she felt the weight of the hospital's walls lighten just a bit. Curiosity led her to pause at the threshold. She watched as the boy giggled, and a grin spread across his face. Even though he was clearly ill IV tubes connected to his arms and dark circles shadowing his eyes, that laughter gave him a glow that was undeniably resilient. It was a stark departure from the usual looks of exhaustion and resignation she was used to. When he noticed her standing there, she felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. But instead of backing away, she mustered her courage to take a step inside. Hi, she offered timidly, her voice nearly as quiet as the whir of the IV machine. I'm Sarah, one of the nurses on this floor. Are you enjoying a comedy show? He nodded. His name was Tommy, she soon learned, and he told her he was watching an old stand-up routine from decades ago. Sarah, feeling a spark of genuine interest, asked which comedian it was. Listening to him talk animatedly about the jokes that he found funniest, she noticed something interesting. While the other patients in oncology often seemed crushed by the weight of treatment, Tommy held onto a thread of joy through laughter. The timid nurse's heart fluttered at the idea. Could laughter be the small flame that fended off the darkness of illness? Over the following days, Sarah visited Tommy whenever she had a spare moment. She would peek into his room to see if he was awake, and if he was, they'd share a few minutes discussing a funny movie scene or comedic bit. He teased her gently for being too serious, and she responded with a shy shrug, explaining it was just how she was. Yet she found that with each conversation, a sense of possibility began to form in the back of her mind. What if humor could be harnessed as a kind of therapy for patients who were battling tough illnesses day after day? The more she thought about it, the more the idea blossomed. She recalled a magazine article she had read in nursing school about the power of laughter and positive thinking in improving patient outcomes. It sounded so simple and idealistic at the time, yet here was real proof in front of her. A young patient who turned to comedy to keep his spirit buoyed. She did some research on her own during breaks, discovering that some hospitals had tried laughter therapy programs before, offering comedic activities for patients under controlled settings. It was a unique and fun approach to healing, emphasizing that while medicine and traditional treatments addressed the body, laughter could help treat the mind and soul. Still, Sarah was hesitant. She was a first-year nurse, overshadowed by more experienced staff members. Her voice typically trembled whenever she had to speak at a department meeting. She worried that if she pitched such an unusual idea, she might be brushed aside or, worse yet, laughed at in the wrong way. Part of her was convinced no one would ever trust such a timid, quiet nurse to lead something like a laughter therapy program. But the seed had been planted, and she couldn't ignore it. An opportunity to present her idea came one afternoon when the oncology department held a team meeting. The head nurse, Lucinda, asked if anyone had any fresh ideas for patient engagement. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she feared others would hear it echoing in the sterile meeting room. She forced herself to raise her hand. Gaining the attention of everyone in the room, her voice was barely above a whisper. She spoke about how she had witnessed patients respond well to humor, specifically describing her experiences with Tommy. She mentioned her research on laughter therapy, how it could reduce stress hormones and improve patients' outlook. By the end, her cheeks were flushed and she couldn't meet anyone's gaze. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Lucinda broke the silence with a thoughtful nod. So, you propose we introduce a structured laughter therapy program? Sarah could only manage a timid nod in response. She was ready for rejection or for the idea to be drowned in bureaucratic disclaimers. But instead, Lucinda gestured for Sarah to continue. Encouraged by that small vote of confidence, Sarah's words came out in a rush. She explained possible activities, group sessions where patients would watch funny clips, share jokes, or participate in gentle movement to prompt laughter. Even caregivers might enjoy it. She believed it could significantly lighten the emotional load that many patients carried. Once the meeting ended, however, Sarah's sense of resolve wavered. A few colleagues patted her shoulder, while a couple others seemed skeptical, suggesting that patients might not want to waste their time on silly jokes when they were already exhausted from treatment. Sarah's eyes lowered, and she left the room feeling both a spark of hope and a weight of doubt. The next day, to her surprise, Lucinda approached her during a coffee break. "I'd like to see this laughter therapy plan of yours," the head nurse said. "If we can fit it into our budget and scheduling, perhaps we could try it as a pilot program." The words left Sarah stunned. She quickly promised to have a proposal in writing soon. She worked diligently for days, drafting a plan that included short 30-minute sessions 3 times a week, a room set aside for patient gatherings, and easy access for anyone who wanted to drop in. She found out that the hospital's therapy clown, a part-time volunteer named Jolly John, was willing to collaborate. She also talked to the hospital's media department about procuring comedic DVDs or streaming subscription codes to show family-friendly stand-up routines and classic comedic films. As she hammered out the details, Sarah's heart pounded with a mix of excitement and absolute terror. It was one thing to come up with an idea and present it. It was another thing entirely to stand in front of a group and ensure the laughter was genuine. She wasn't exactly a natural performer. Still, if it meant giving patients a breather from their woes, she was determined to try. She saw Tommy again in his room and told him about the budding initiative. He grinned ear to ear. "That means you can watch stand-up with me, right?" he asked. The sparkle in his eyes reminded her that no matter how many obstacles stood in the way, it was worth trying to bring a dash of humor where it was needed most. Once the hospital approved her proposal, Sarah worked with Jolly John and 2 other enthusiastic nurses to prepare the inaugural session. On the first day, only 3 patients showed up. Tommy was there, along with an elderly gentleman named Maurice and a slightly nervous pregnant woman on bed rest. Ava. Chairs were placed in a small recreation room that had once been used for art therapy sessions. Sarah's palms were clammy and her voice cracked when she began speaking, cutting through her anxiety. Jolly John jumped in with a pair of juggling balls, delivering some lighthearted clownery that quickly elicited giggles from the group. That heartened Sarah. She slowly introduced a short stand-up clip from a popular comedian, and the small group watched it together. By the end, there were soft chuckles, and even the stoic Maurice managed a smile. It was a modest success, but the sense of uplift in the room was real. In the subsequent weeks, word spread. Patients told their neighbors in the wards. Family members, initially curious, began attending the sessions as well, so that soon a group of 7 or 8 consistently showed up. Activities evolved to include laughter yoga, in which participants performed simple, silly exercises that prompted them to laugh out loud. No comedic skill was required, just a willingness to drop one's inhibitions for a short while. The laughter often started forced or awkward, but quickly turned genuine. Sarah observed new connections forming among the attendees. People who might have never spoken to each other in hallways or waiting rooms now swapped jokes and puns. She found herself stepping out of her shell and at times offering gentle humor to coax laughter from those who hesitated. Working with the therapy clown, she even managed to learn a few basic slapstick routines. They were time-worn tricks like pretending to stumble or using inflatable hammers for comedic effect, but the simplicity made them delightful. The room would fill with laughter, and Sarah would see lines of tension around eyes and mouths temporarily erased. Some patients started calling these sessions the joy breaks, a place where, for half an hour, they could forget their IV poles, their medication schedules, and their anxieties. An unexpected surge of confidence began to open Sarah's voice. She found that laughter therapy worked not only on patients, but also on her own anxieties. Leading these sessions challenged her fears of public speaking, but each burst of laughter and each smile reminded her why this mattered. She learned to greet strangers with a small joke or a playful nudge, and in doing so, felt her once timid spark grow brighter. She was no longer content to stay invisible behind the scenes. She wanted to step forward and serve as a guiding light for patients who needed levity. Some hospital staff still had reservations. One particularly stern doctor, Dr. Sellers, lectured Sarah in the cafeteria one day, saying that while good cheer was a nice sentiment, patients needed serious medical intervention, and laughter was merely a frivolous distraction. His words stung, but Sarah refused to let them halt her progress. She had witnessed transformations firsthand, how quietly depressed patients became more engaged, or how a grim expression relaxed into a genuine grin after just 10 minutes of comedic relief. She thought of Tommy, who had told her he slept better after a good laugh. She remembered how Ava's worried face loosened into cautious giggles whenever Jolly John performed a silly dance. She even recalled the big moment when Maurice, after multiple sessions, cracked a joke of his own that made the entire room roar with laughter. Sarah treasured those moments as proof that serious medicine and lighthearted laughter weren't mutually exclusive, but instead could complement each other beautifully. Around the 5th week of the new initiative, Sarah noticed an older woman in a wheelchair silently observing the sessions from the hall. She appeared frail, a scarf tied around her head, which Sarah assumed was to hide hair loss from chemotherapy. Each day, the woman hovered just out of earshot, listening to the peals of laughter echo from inside. Sarah decided to approach her. She learned the woman's name was Rosa, a grandmother from out of town who couldn't speak English fluently. Rosa hesitated to join the group, but Sarah gently coaxed her in with a warm smile. As soon as Rosa crossed the threshold, many of the regulars recognized her uncertain posture and they gave her encouraging nods. Though she didn't understand all of the English jokes, she responded eagerly to the universal language of laughter, clapping her hands when others laughed, letting the joy in the room vibrate through her. By the end of that session, Rosa's eyes sparkled and she gave Sarah a tearful hug. It turned out that she had felt isolated in the hospital, shy about her limited language skills, but was desperate for companionship. Laughter, she realized, didn't need translation. One afternoon, the hospital administration decided to evaluate the laughter program. A small delegation, including Dr. Sellers and Lucinda, plus a member of the board, walked in to observe a session. Sarah caught sight of them standing in the corner, their notepads at the ready, and her pulse increased. She had carefully prepared a routine that day with Jolly John, featuring comedic sketches and exercises that encouraged the patients to stand up, stretch, and let out simple, hearty laughs. She worried that the presence of the suits and the stern doctor might dampen the mood, but she persevered anyway. She started by having everyone form a small circle. They practiced a technique involving making eye contact with each other and pretending to hand off an invisible ball while letting out playful sounds. The silly game prompted giggles and snickers, and soon enough the entire group was laughing so heartily that wiping joyful tears became necessary. Even Dr. Sellers allowed a reluctant grin to tug at his lips. At the end of the session, the administrative board member, Greg Jenkins, stepped forward. He commended the group for boosting patient morale and said he was eager to see what measurable effects the program might have. Despite his bureaucratic tone, Sarah sensed a certain sincerity behind his words. Later that evening, Lucinda found Sarah tidying up the laughter therapy room and gave her a small hug. "I'm proud of you," Lucinda whispered. The mutual respect and gratitude in their eyes spoke volumes. Sarah, once anxious to speak her mind, was now the architect of a program that helped not only a handful of patients, but also the hospital at large. She realized that something as simple as good humor could nudge open locked doors in a place dominated by the seriousness of illness and clinical routine. The program continued to flourish over the next few months, becoming a fixture of daily life in the oncology ward and beyond. Patients undergoing long treatments often planned their schedules around the joy breaks, while family members relished the opportunity to laugh amidst the heartbreak of hospital life. With more people attending, the environment in the rec room turned lively and jubilant. The laughter sessions also spawned smaller circles of camaraderie, patients gathering in the hallways to repeat jokes or inside rooms to watch comedic films together. Of course, there were times when laughter wavered in the face of tough news. Sarah remembered one day when Tommy's test results didn't come back as hoped and he was too weak to attend the session. She visited him after, bracing for that now all too familiar heaviness. Glancing at him lying in the hospital bed, a swirl of fear in his eyes, she gingerly took his hand. Despite her efforts to muster some comforting words, she found it difficult to speak. Then, drawing a deep breath, she told him a simple, silly riddle she had heard the previous day. For a moment, that spark reappeared. He gave a soft chuckle and said, "That's so bad it's good." The tension in the room lifted ever so slightly, and while his body was tired, in that moment he was still Tommy the boy who found solace in humor. It wasn't always easy. Some patients found it difficult to laugh when pain and uncertainty dominated their world. But Sarah discovered something crucial. Even those who struggled to produce an actual laugh might derive comfort from watching others enjoy themselves. There was a subtle yet influential collective energy in a group of laughing people. It was as though hope radiated outward, reaching anyone open to receiving it. It didn't change diagnoses, and it didn't cure illnesses outright, but it gave patients a sense of control, a reason to smile through adversity. Sarah's own transformation proved just as remarkable. Gone was the frightened, quiet figure who tiptoed through corridors. She embraced her role as a cheerleader of recovery. She still fought anxiety, her hands still trembled before each session, but she found that facing the shakes and stumbles head-on was its own therapy. It allowed her to connect with people more deeply than she had ever imagined. Eventually, the hospital published a short article on its website highlighting the success of the laughter therapy sessions. They shared patient testimonials, including quotes from Tommy about how it helped him keep his spirits up during some of his darkest days. Rosa added a heartfelt statement about how laughter crossed all linguistic barriers. The article made its way around social media, and soon a local newspaper picked up the story. The press labeled Sarah a laughter nurse, which made her blush uncontrollably. She was never one to seek the spotlight, but she had to admit she felt a sense of pride in what she and her team had accomplished. As the months rolled on, some of the patients who attended the program were discharged. Many of them promised to carry on the spirit of laughter wherever they went. Ava returned months later to show off her healthy baby boy, offering a grateful hug and story about how laughter therapy had kept her anxiety in check during her complicated pregnancy. Maurice, ever stoic, sent a postcard from home with a brief message. "My wife says I smile more. Thank you." Rosa gave Sarah an embroidered handkerchief with a bright yellow sun on it, a symbol to remember that the light of laughter could pierce the darkest clouds. The greatest surprise came when Dr. Sellers himself approached Sarah in the hallway one evening. He looked less stiff than usual, his lips curved in an almost smile. He stopped her with a gesture and said, "You know, I was skeptical at first, but I've been reviewing the feedback and some preliminary studies. It seems that laughter therapy is really making a difference for stress levels and overall patient satisfaction. Sarah beamed, and he continued, I apologize for dismissing it earlier. You've done something quite extraordinary here. With that acknowledgement, Sarah felt another barrier dissolve. Her once timid dreams had found fertile ground, and the seeds had blossomed far beyond her imagination. The hospital administrators now wished to expand the concept to other wards. Discussions emerged about introducing short comedic interludes on patient televisions and creating laughter corner in waiting rooms. Sarah's suggestions were welcomed rather than overlooked. When Tommy's condition improved enough for him to be discharged, the entire laughter therapy group, along with Jolly John, sent him off with a special session in his room. They gave him a fun farewell laughter salute, which involved everyone throwing confetti and delivering a goofy synchronized laugh. Tommy grinned, though tears rimmed his eyes as he thanked Sarah for giving him something bright to look forward to each day. You taught me that you could still laugh even when the world feels scary, he said, his voice cracking gently. That matters more than you know. In the quiet that followed his departure, Sarah felt the bittersweet pang that every caregiver knows. Joy at a patient recovering enough to go home, and sorrow watching them leave after forming such a close bond. Yet she also felt a radiant sense of purpose. Once terrified of speaking out, she had discovered her courage and proven that nurturing patients meant tending to their spirits too. Her shy heart had found a voice in laughter. Late one evening, after she had locked up the rec room where the session was held, Sarah took a moment to reflect. She sat in the now empty circle of chairs, remembering the echoes of giggles and the sight of hopeful faces. She realized that none of this would have happened if she hadn't confronted her own insecurities. That timid nurse who once lingered in the background found not just a cause, but a bright spark that had fanned into flames, lighting corridors that were previously dimmed by despair. Slowly, she turned off the lights and closed the door behind her. The corridor stretched ahead, fluorescent lights reflecting off the polished floors. It was well past visiting hours, and most of the bustling day staff had gone home. She could still hear the faint crescendo of the hospital's beeping machines and distant footsteps of night shift workers. Her footsteps echoed quietly as she walked away from the rec room, her mind still dancing with the memories of joyous laughter. While she might not be a comedian or an entertainer by nature, she was a caretaker of the heart in a place often overshadowed by pain. The ward was quieter than usual, giving her a rare moment of silence to think about this new chapter in her life's work. She could imagine continuing to refine the laughter therapy program, maybe training newer nurses, or inviting local comedians to volunteer. The possibilities were endless, and with every new idea, that warmth in her chest expanded. For so long, she had feared her voice was too small, her confidence too fragile to make a difference. But this journey taught her that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it starts as a soft, timid breath that whispers, "You can do this," and then grows with each new step. And so, continuing down the hallway, she felt a calm determination fueling her steps. A gentle smile curled on her lips, remembering the way a giggle can pierce the thickest gloom. She had witnessed the power of joy firsthand. Patients, regardless of their condition or background, found something to share, a moment of levity that reminded them of their own resilience. And in creating a space for laughter, she had discovered something profound about herself. She was no longer content with the shadows. She wanted to bring light into the darkest corners of the hospital. This, she realized, was her purpose, born from her once timid spirit, forever changed by the healing power of laughter. She inhaled deeply, savoring the sense of fulfillment. Tomorrow, she would do it all again, and that thought filled her with an indescribable peace.